we're going to go ahead and get started here today. If you're on for the Sowing Success, the role of economic development districts in strengthening regional food systems, you're in the right place. My name is Andrew Coker, and I'm a regional development researcher here at NADO. And I'm joined by my colleague, Melissa Levy, who is also a regional development researcher and wealth creation specialist here at NADO. This webinar today is provided by the Economic Development District Community of Practice Program. We are going to have questions and comments in the chat, and we will get to those at the end. So feel free to post those at any time as they come up, and we will make sure that we get to them. The recording of the webinar will also be available at the nado.org/EDDCOP website. And we also have a post-webinar survey that will also give us some feedback on interesting or things you're interested in learning about within food systems, as well as general NADO welcome everybody. We also just a little breakdown today of who we are as NADO. As you can see on the left, we have the National Association, which is a membership group that really tries to promote regional strategies, partnerships, and solutions to strengthen economic competitiveness and quality of life. Along with that, we have the NADO Research Foundation, which is where Melissa and I work, where we provide a lot of these education, research, and training for economic development and RDO staff. Again, I mentioned the Economic Development District Community of Practice Program, which is supported by the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Please feel free to check out our website. It's nado.org/EDDCOP/. We've got a lot of great information, a lot of great case studies, as well as our new food systems report that Melissa and I worked on. So very proud of it, very happy to see it come to fruition. Louise and Jennifer were both contributors to that piece, so definitely appreciate their support. We have a great kind of panel today for us. We're going to start with Melissa Levy, who I introduced earlier, who's going to talk a little bit about how the wealth creation model of economic development and framework can be used to really support food system development and regional economic development. After Melissa, we'll have Jennifer Bedrosian, who's the Food Systems Coordinator at Piedmont Triad Regional Council, and Nieves-Ruiz, who's the Director of Economic Development at East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. Both of Jennifer and Louise are going to talk about kind of the on-the-ground work of how regions can get involved in regional food system work and what they're doing in their region to kind of boost economic and food system resilience. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Melissa.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and nice to see you all. I'm really excited about this resource that we put together. I kind of see it as an evolving resource. I hope to include more and more examples of how economic development districts are interacting with food systems. So I thought we'd just start with what's a food system. I know that Jennifer will probably be going into this also, but it's basically, anything, kind of all of the functions and partners and networks that get food from farm to your table, wherever that table might be. And it's just a complex network that includes all of the inputs and outputs associated with agricultural and food production and consumption. And so you can see here, I'm not going to go into great detail about this because I think that Jennifer probably will. But it starts from food production, moves its way along. This is a food system. It actually leads me into this idea of wealth creation because this could be considered like a value chain, which is the tool that we use in wealth creation, where there are partners all along this chain, and the chains all look different. So this is a very kind of broad idea of a food chain. Typically, we're thinking about something very specific, a specific product or service. But I just want to provide just a really basic, like, what's wealth creation, because we produce this resource as sort of looking through a wealth creation lens. And so you'll see on the next slide, the wealth creation is really about connecting a region's assets to market demand. And if we think about that through the lens of food systems, we're talking about food systems and food value chains that build wealth for people in their places. So place-based is what we want it to be. And it brings together this range of all of these different kinds of partners who are getting what they need from that system. And it's really about building a sector, a sector around particular food products and services rather than focusing on a business or a couple of businesses. These are the principles. We're talking about creating wealth, very broadly defined, which I'll share in a second. Keeping that wealth local through different structures of local ownership and control, and building livelihoods by intentionally including those on the economic and the social margins in those systems. The 8 forms of wealth are here. When I talk about wealth and creating wealth through food systems, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm not going to go through all of these, but they all relate. And there are food value chains and food system initiatives that have taken a wealth creation approach that have been focused on building these forms of wealth. You can use these not only for assessing, just understanding what kinds of assets you have at your disposal, but also in terms of designing strategies around food systems or other sectors. Right now, obviously, we're talking about food, and then also in measuring outcomes. I know some folks from the North Central Regional Food Business Center are on, and they are using wealth creation and the principles and the forms of wealth in as a lens through which to look at all of their work. And they are using it in terms of evaluation as well, which is really exciting. So the main tool of wealth creation, which is what I wanted to kind of focus on here, is really about value chains and as a way to tie wealth to place and connect regionally. And it really is focused on these wealth creation value chains, which is really a network of people, businesses, institutions, and nonprofits who collaborate to meet market demand for specific products or services, each advancing individual self-interest while together creating greater local wealth. So this kind of value chain idea is making sure that everybody gets what they need from interacting in a value chain while also creating greater wealth all around. And there are great examples. I'm not going to share a lot of examples. I think the WealthWorks website and the NADO wealth creation website both have some really interesting examples of value chains and value chain mapping. That's not necessarily what this webinar is about, but I'll just finish with a few last kind of few thoughts. I think there's a couple more slides, but there are kind of 3 key parts to a value chain. One is connecting with an actual market opportunity, that there's demand partners who actually are interested in thinking about partnerships and creating products that meet that market opportunity. It's about bringing together a network of businesses all along that chain who are providing different functions, and it's intentionally building those forms of wealth rooted in a place. On the next slide, again, this is just an example. Like, we talk about this in terms of a sector, but really what you need to build a value chain is a market opportunity. So you have to get fairly specific if you want to be building a value chain. And we're not necessarily talking about that in this webinar, but I just wanted to kind of show you what that actually means. So if you look at, the sector is agriculture, the subsector is dairy, we have to get fairly specific if we want to build a value chain that supports multiple businesses. And then finally, I am going to be doing a webinar on value chains soon. And so we'll go much deeper into what that actually means, how you map it, like how you kind of interact with it. But what this resource is really about is about how do EDDs engage in food systems. And I think in my experience and in doing the research for this resource, I think we found that EDDs can support food system development by doing things they're already really good at, like facilitation and convening, finding, different sources of funding to support this kind of work, and providing public and social service programs. On the next slide, these are some of the things EDDs are already experts in that can be supporting this work. They're identifying issues and how they affect their communities. They're identifying and prioritizing regional and local assets. They're building coalitions. They're planning regional responses, and they're bringing funding to bear and guiding partners in implementation. So these are things that they do in all kinds of other sectors, and they can definitely be doing it in food as well. So what can EDDs do in their own regions? Apply for and help others apply for funding. Typically, food funding around food systems comes through USDA, but EDA, I think, can support kind of some of the more infrastructure-based connections to food systems. Providing support to entrepreneurs, a lot of EDDs are already doing this. There are probably food system entrepreneurs that need that kind of support. And then convening stakeholders in food hub development, providing planning support, and including food systems in the SEDS is actually probably, that should have probably been first, is really getting it into the SEDS so you can do all of these other things. So I think that is all I have for you, but we just wanted to kind of like give you a bit of an overview of kind of where we're coming from and putting this resource together and how EDDs can start to engage. And as I said, the value chain pieces I'll definitely be covering on another webinar. We'll go deeper on that, but I just wanted to provide just a real basic understanding of what that means. So.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And it really is kind of good, I think, to kind of level set and get that high level view of what EDDs can do in this space. Our next two speakers are really going to kind of drill down on that. What are EDDs doing? And really give some helpful tips for some of you who may want to engage in food system work more or already have existing food system programs. So I did have one poll, if you'd entertain me. I did want to get kind of an idea of where some of y'all are at in terms of regional food systems development and regional food systems work. So you should see a poll show up on your screen here. Has your organization been involved in regional food systems work? Very easy, simple question. Yes, no, no, but we plan to in NA. So very interested to see some of the results as they come in. And thank you all. Very, very quick responses there. Looks like we have a lot of people who are already engaged in food systems work, as well as several people who aren't, but really want to get involved in all of this. So thank you for entertaining me on that one. Next up for our speakers, we're going to have Jennifer Bedrosian from the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. Jennifer, if you take it away.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to share my screen there. All right, and you all are seeing not my notes, right? My presentation. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm excited you all are here today to think about food systems. I get to think about this as a full-time food system coordinator in the planning department at Piedmont Triad Regional Council. So I hope today I can share some inspiration and help you all see some ways that EDDs can plug in if you are not already, or think about how to build your programs. So I'll just give a little background. Again, I'm at Piedmont Triad Regional Council. We are in North Carolina, serving the Piedmont Triad region. We have 78 member governments in a 12-county area. So again, I'm in the planning department, but work really closely with our economic development, workforce, aging, criminal justice, and community development as well. We actually support, and in my role, I support a regional food council. So we had a recommendation a number of years ago to form a regional food council. So that's part of my role, is supporting this really amazing group of folks. This council was formed in 2019 and represented by around 20 partners and community members across our 12 counties, offering different perspectives on the food system. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the food system. I know Melissa started this conversation. This graphic is something that our food council produced a few years ago. And again, kind of around the wheel there are the different aspects of the food system. This work, food systems work really requires building relationships and trust. And I always say can be different entry points to how you might get involved in this. So I'm going to kind of walk you through. I often get asked how we got started in this. I'm going to kind of give you a high-level overview of how we did that, and then kind of walk you through some specific programs so you can kind of see what that looks like. So we produced this chart about the food system. Again, kind of reiterating what Melissa was saying, it's different aspects of production, processing, distribution, food and retail and market, consumption, and even waste recovery. So there can be it can be overwhelming to think about managing or taking on all these things at once. So I think it's helpful to think about which entry point has the most community energy, and that's a good place to start. Around the outside of this wheel are a few different topics that our food council felt like were really important when thinking about food systems work. And I'll just kind of walk you through those. So really learning together about understanding how food is produced and the impact on the community and environment. Really wanting to focus on making sure that those most impacted are meaningfully involved in the decisions that impact their lives. Thinking about boosting sustainability, looking forward to protecting resources for future generations. I know we all kind of balance that land use and thinking about that with development, but thinking about ways to preserve land, decrease pollution, lower transportation costs. Obviously supporting local food economies, creating jobs for local workers, good paying jobs, desirable jobs. Improving access and equity, increasing the availability of affordable, nutritious, and culturally relevant foods in our programs, making sure that everyone has what they need to thrive. And I kind of skipped up at the top, starting with farmers, that recognizing that those folks are really people getting food on our table, and they form the backbone of this community food system. And again, there are lots of ways to get involved. Again, we have a food council here at Piedmont Triad Regional Council. That's a great place for us to share information and to get guidance on different programs. But you all probably have local food councils in your some cities and even counties and statewide. And so if you're not connected with them, I would really encourage you to do that. So one of our entry points here, kind of looking back on how we got started in this work through building lots of partnerships. But in 2015, FRAC, the Food Research and Action Center, ranked Greensboro High Point is one of our larger urban areas as #1 in the nation in food hardship and #4 in food insecurity. So we've moved up in that time to around #14, but that statistic really catalyzed a movement in our area thinking about food insecurity. It was kind of one of the entry points. A lot of nonprofits and community-based organizations started talking about food insecurity and thinking about how we can help people in that space. One of the first things that as a regional food council that we took on was conducting a regional food system assessment. You'll get the slides after this, and I'm not going to go into it in depth in this webinar, but there is a link where you can access that on our website if you want to go back and look at our findings. We conducted this throughout 2019, mostly throughout 2020, and released information in 2021. And there's some great information there. Many of the, and we've been working through some of the recommendations from that food assessment. Although it was 2020, the recommendations really, the issues are really still there. They're still the same. Some of the numbers have changed and shifted a little bit, but the big issues that came up in our region are still very relevant. As a backbone to starting our food assessment, our council started looking at equity and really wanted to make equity a focus of our research, and developed or approved this definition, working definition here, to help us drive that research forward. And that's from policylink.org. So these are some of the big recommendations that came out of our assessment. Up at the top of our photos of some of our food council members, events, and different folks in the community that we've engaged with over the years. But I'll just walk you through some of these and kind of give you some examples of how we have gone about doing this, so that you can hopefully think about how this would be similar in your area. So engaging leaders of color and small grassroots organizations to co-create strategies. We've done this through food council representation, thinking through grant partners, offering speaking roles at different events, paid roles, inviting people and organizations to attend events, and also going to where people are and attending partner events through some of these grassroots organizations. And even some that are not necessarily food related or food specific, but I think that almost every area kind of intersects with food, I've found. So second one is reducing the administrative burden to participate in programs and relationships. This has been a really key piece in how we've built partnerships. So we offer grant writing support. We have been fiscal agents on grants. We have also hosted an event a couple of years ago at one of our land grant universities, NC-A&T University, and worked with a couple of caterers. One was a women-owned catering company, and the other one was women-owned BIPOC catering company. And we were able to complete paperwork for them and kind of get them linked into the system so that they were approved vendors in the event. And that was kind of a small way that we were able to help with, move some things along with that administrative burden. Expanding partnerships. We've thought outside of the box a little bit on this too, and had an event here at our office where we had a farmer's market. We worked with some of our food council members and the folks that they were engaged with to host a farmer's market and help our staff meet people across the region. It was just a one-day event. We weren't looking to host a farmer's market on a regular basis, but as many other people do that very well. But just thinking about other kind of out-of-the-box ways to expand partnerships that are a little bit more non-traditional. Integrating food system needs into local and regional economic development strategies. Obviously, SEDS, as Melissa mentioned, is a great first step to including food systems in your SEDS, so you can start thinking about these things. But other ways that we've plugged in here are offering feasibility reports. So our economic development and workforce development are combined departments here at PTRC, and I work very closely with them. We have a couple of food projects that have come up in our area recently. One of those is a wash, cut, and pack facility. Like, think about chopped green beans that are, packaged up and go to market, or salads. And this group wants to kind of start this facility and was looking for a feasibility report for and thinking about funding for that. So this is a way that we were able to step in and help them with that report. And also a commercial kitchen in our area reached out to us about a report as well, looking to for ED, looking to apply for EDA funds. Build small grant programs that support food access at a micro level. We, a few years ago, offered a participatory grant making process for some really small grassroots food work in our area. It was called shared gifting. That's one way that we've done that, and then are trying to think about other ways to incorporate grant programs into funding as well. Mapping microfarms and food infrastructure. I'll talk a little bit more about this on my next slide, but we host a map on our website, food infrastructure map, and are continuing to think about ways to update that. And then working with existing lenders to expand access to capital for underserved food businesses. And I'll also talk about this here on the next slide as well. But it's a big project, new project that we're excited about. All right, so kind of looking back again, I said I often get asked, like, how did you get started in this? What's a good starting point? So hopefully this will give you a high level overview of how we got through this process. So starting, I've been in my role since January of 2020. So a lot of work happened prior to that to get to where we are now. One of the first projects that we were a partner on and not a lead applicant was this local food infrastructure map. It was called the North Carolina Growing Together Project, and we had some really big institutional partners and some funding from EDA. This was through Center for Environmental Farming Systems through NC State University. It was a really highly collaborative project with dozens of partners across the state, and we put together this map, which we still keep housed on our website and get asked questions about it quite often. The funding for that project did run out. We've continued to do updates as we can, but I'll talk a little bit about our next steps in that project. Kind of from there, again, earlier I mentioned that we had recommendations to start a regional food council. In the steps to do that, the first thing that happened was we started a task force, and we had a little bit of money from USDA through to help us with that, starting up a food council and getting a web presence. And we also partnered with a statewide entity. I think it's Community Food Strategies, which is named in the report that Melissa shared, that helped us to form this task force and build some relationships. And we were able to leverage funding for a larger grant through Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina Foundation, which funded our food council work and my full-time staff position for 4 years. I've already mentioned our regional food system assessment. From there, we hosted shared those findings with giving presentations across the country, not across the country, across the state, and county commissioner presentations. Our council felt really strongly about not wanting that report to sit on the shelf. So that's been a priority for us, is trying to figure out ways to keep sharing that information. We did that also through a big launch event called Learn, Build, Eat, which we won a NADO Impact Award for. And it was really, it was a really exciting, we got to go out and take video of butchers and restaurants using local food and talk to farmers in our region and make it really engaging. So that was a lot of fun and shared information. I think we had over 100 people that attended that event. And it's also on our website if anybody is interested in going back and taking a look at that. I mentioned our big event. We were kind of coming out of COVID. We were coming out of COVID as a food council and had been doing a lot of things virtually. And our council wanted to host an event to really celebrate local food and promote networking across our region. And so we hosted an event focused on 2 conversations that were really bubbling up to the top. which were building equitable farmer support and creating resilient food hubs in our region. So we have a lot of kind of budding food hubs that are thinking about aggregation in our area right now. And we were able to summarize results from that event and apply for, use those conversations to apply for a couple of other funding opportunities. So each thing is kind of like leading into something bigger, in which we're really excited to share that we were awarded a Healthy Food Financing Initiatives Partnership Program grant. And we were PTRC was one of 16 groups across the country. You might have heard of HFFI. So they have a few different programs, but we're a part of the partnerships program for 5 years to be able to provide technical assistance, credit and capacity building, and credit enhancement opportunities. So grants and loans to eligible food businesses in low income, low access areas. So in order to do that, we've partnered with 2 CDFI mission-driven lenders and are looking to, we have a kickoff for this program coming up here at our office in December. That we are also have a priority focus on women-owned, BIPOC-owned, and rural businesses for this opportunity. So we're really excited about this. We have done some lending before here at our organization, brownfields, revolving loan fund, and several other revolving loan funds here, but this is the first one in the food space. So the last thing I'm going to talk about before I pass it off to Luis is our map update that I mentioned earlier. We have been engaged in conversations over the last couple of years about a way to re-energize this map and to do a very robust update. Again, with lots of partners. We spent about 2 years in conversations that we've had a lot of engagement on. And we did use some of our feedback from our big event to apply for another USDA grant, an RFSP grant. We did learn this last week that unfortunately we did not receive that funding. However, our group is really committed to thinking about how we can continue to find other funding and move this project forward, to really focus on opportunities for high impact investment and health, and thinking about farmers and addressing equity issues and markets. We came up with a pretty innovative way across the state. Even though we work in 12 counties, we've been kind of leading the conversations in this space around hosting a statewide map. So if anybody's got great ideas or wants to be a partner on this, certainly reach out. My contact information is on this slide. And with that, I will pass it off to Luis.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. And just a quick note again, we will have questions at the end of the presentation after Luis speaks. So feel free to post those in the chat as they come up, and we'll get to them at the end. So Luis, are you ready?
As ready as I can be. So welcome everyone. My name is Nieves-Ruiz. I'm currently the Director of Economic Development for the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. We have been an economic development district since about 2004, and we're located in Orlando, Florida. So I always like to give start presentation with talking about who we are. We are one of 10 designated Florida economic development districts in the state of Florida. Our charge is basically to provide technical assistance to local governments and organizations located within an 8-county region. It's a very diverse region. Metro Orlando, it's really urbanized. Then we have 2 coastal counties and 3 more inland counties. It's very diverse. And we have been doing, at least I've been in the council 11 years. I always count that I've been doing my food systems work here for about 10.5 years. So when we talk about our regional food systems activities here at the council, I always have these really 3 big buckets that I talk people through. So first we have what's called the asset mapping project. We are also very keen of melding some of our practice areas outside economic development. So we do a lot of work on resilience and trends analysis. And finally, we do community revitalization. And I'm going to be giving you examples of all three of those. So back in 2014, I believe, 2014, 2015. 2015, yes. I received a grant from the state, the Florida Commerce Department. And what we're going to do for first task to prepare what will become our first regional food system plan. That was only for Orange County. We did receive another grant. We're able to sort of start working in Seminole County up north. But around 2018, I actually was awarded a fellowship by the Wallace Center at Greenrock International. And I was able with that money to hire an intern to work pretty much on our other counties. There were 6 counties there. So it's like, what was the purpose here? Well, the purpose here, we wanted to really tell the story to people that are non-food systems practitioners about what is the economic potential of regional food systems. And the best way to do this is to actually help them visualize how big it is and help them to really truly understand what can encompass their food systems and how big it is. So the first thing that we did, we actually did a map of agricultural land for 8 counties. This is a very interesting process. We had to go to each of the property appraisers' websites. The Department of Revenue codes that they use are all very different. So we had to create kind of like a nomenclature and a framework to actually get them all to work together. But we had identified the land that was assessed as agricultural land. And then we also identified what type of products they're actually doing based on that land. What we found out is that there was not a specific match between the number of establishments we were able to find and the actual land that we had. That's for various reasons. One is because our biggest expanse of land is actually pasture land. It covers about 98% of the county. And the joke we have here is that there are a lot of lonely cows in our region. So the people who basically put their cows in a pasture because they want to wait for development and they want to be able to get an exemption of that, which is really sad. But we're an urbanizing area, so that is expected. So what we also did, we did like what we call a food systems inventory. We use various data sources here. Most of our data for distributors and processors was based on the Data Axle Infogroup database. And basically, that's a business database that identifies a business by the North American Industry Classification System. Farms was a little more interesting because farms were harder to find. That was not the best method to identify them. So we relied on a lot of different databases. Facebook was actually very helpful because a lot of these like smaller farms, big farms, they're all in Facebook right now. So in total, we were able to identify close to 700 establishments involved in food production systems in our 8-county region. So why will we do this? The main thing was really funny because when we finished our mapping project and everybody really liked the maps, they were like, oh, these maps are really cool. And usually I will get most of the time a really good reception, except I went to this economic development conference. And I remember we were able to actually translate a lot of this information into an interactive map. And one of the attendees kind of asked me, well, okay, you map all these establishments, like, what are you really going to do with it? And it kind of like made me reflect. It's like, how effective was my work being? I definitely enjoyed the research part and understanding how the food system works. And in that, we had also, when we did these inventories, we actually not only identified establishments, but we also developed a lot of like extra columns of information to actually identify if you were a farm, what type of product did you have? If you were basically a warehouse, do you do cold storage? did you specialize in groceries? So we had about 11 colors of information, and it was great. But in the end, mapping, and I think that my previous presenter was pretty much said, it's very hard to actually keep a map updated. Businesses open and close every year. So what you want to do the mapping for is you just want to be able to understand what are the trends happening in your community. And around this time, about a year after I finished my fellowship, we had COVID-19 come in. And COVID-19 basically saw the collapse of our regional food system. On one side, people couldn't get to their markets because of the pandemic. They had to stay home. Then on the other hand, all these food producers were actually throwing their crops away because their markets, restaurants were closed, hotels were closed, so the markets were closed. So what we decided to do here is to basically try to create a more resiliency focus. At the council here, because we have the coastal counties, we're really good at performing vulnerability analysis. So we said, what if we, instead of like looking at resilience, not only as a coastal program of sea level rise and storm surge, but we applied this lens to food systems, because in the end, COVID-19 is a shock to our system. That shock actually showed some structural problems that we had. So when we applied it to food, we divided this project. We applied actually for another grant from the Department of Commerce, and we were awarded that. So what we started doing here is this was going to be our approach. So we did an existing conditions analysis, which included the asset inventory that I told you before that we had created already. And we were able to actually start developing some metrics to measure the health of our food systems. This led to a regional trends report, which I'm going to be describing in more detail, to understand what are the underlying dynamics of our system and identify those gaps and barriers we sort of need to face as an EDD. Finally, we did a strategic matrix. This is based on a SWOT analysis because we did have a lot of volunteers. We had about, I will say, about 10, 15 people actually helping us developing the plan and looking at the data. So what did our resiliency analysis found? Well, when you look at land use, we knew we have 1.7 million acres of agricultural land, but when you have 98% of that as pasture land, you know there's a problem. Yes, crops are going to take less space as pasture, but still it's not healthy when you have so much land. I should say that here in our region, we're home to one of the largest cattle ranches in the United States called Desert Ranch. And they actually basically raise calves. But it's really funny because most of those calves actually while they're raised here, they're taken to the Midwest to get like fatter and older, and then they're processed over there. So it's like we raise the calves, but then we buy the steak, which is really interesting. So as part of the land use trends, we actually tried to identify what we thought were the more vulnerable parcels by the county. And we had about 5 different factors, anything from proximity to urbanization, what type of product they were. So we developed kind of this metric system to identify where land was actually the most going to be affected. As you can see here, Seminole County, which is one of the smaller counties in the north, had the parcels that were more propense to actually be urbanized. Business stress, what we found out, which is something that we suspected, our farms and our processors are very small operations, most of them. This is not surprising. We are Orlando. We're not a manufacturing community. But it's really interesting too, because we have the strongest leisure and hospitality market in the nation. So haven't we created those connections is something that still is a little shocking to me. But when we actually went to the farms, and I think that we were talking basically before about the chain coordination, what we found out is that most of our farms were actually direct sales to consumers. They're going to the farmers market, CSAs, you pick, and they maybe do some agritourism on the side to earn some money. And to strengthen the food system, this model doesn't really work, because there's definitely, if you want your community to earn wealth and your residents to basically realize their full potential, that value-added product is very important. Moreover, when you look at distribution and processing, they were very highly concentrated in Orange County, and we'll discuss that in another slide they're going to show you later. So when we look at value chain coordination, which is, I think that is something that Sarah was talking about, we found out that very few commodities in our region actually go to this value chain. In our case, it's basically nuts and berries, and you can also say, because the citrus has been in heavy decline here in Orlando just because of canker and other diseases. But nuts and berries is a good one where you actually see at least processing to other pros. They go to packing house to be sold outside, or they turn into something like alcoholic beverages. The reason this is happening in part is there's a complete absence of what we call the hard and soft infrastructure. That hard infrastructure is actually going to be the hub or that commercial kitchen where people are actually going to be able to process the product. The soft infrastructure is things more like capital and connections. That's something we're really lacking, and part of that is because we are a very urbanized area. But another problem that we have, and this goes back to the concentration, was what we call the regulatory barriers. As part of the project I was working on with Wallace, we actually look at the zoning codes of the 30 largest jurisdictions in our region. And what we found here is that in most zoning codes did not have good definitions of food uses. They were not included at all. And what happens here, if somebody, and I know this because I was a front desk planner, most planners will understand that if you go and ask for a use that's not in the code, the zoning desk is going to try to assign you the best code they can based on their code. And if you're not, it's just basically going to tell you, sorry, it cannot be done. So that lack of recognition is certainly a problem for our food systems. So as part of the plan, we did a strategic kind of matrix. We run our framework, it's called People, Places, Prosperity. So a lot of these goals are basically assigned to a specific pillar. But let's talk about the really more fun work. I love doing research, but like it was said before, food systems is a great way to actually foster equitable economic development. And we have been involved in a couple of programs. Back around 2018, 2019, we helped this organization in the Holden Heights community. It's a food desert community in Orlando to win this grant for the AINA Foundation. And we created this program called Cycles and Sprouts. The goal of the grant was to increase vegetable consumption within the neighborhood. But we kind of turned it into a training program where Kaylee Square, the provider, was actually teaching both urban agriculture and bicycle repair training. And it was a beautiful program. Some of the pictures that you see here were actually community events where you actually saw people going to the farmlets and actually picking up the produce like they knew it was for them. So it was a very, very exciting, but sadly, it was a 2-year grant. And with it's very hard. Sometimes as EDDs, we focus on just getting that specific grant or just getting the specific funding that's going to last maybe 2-3 years. My vision here was that I want to, especially after this experience, I want to develop a vision to create a real program. This is another project that we did around this time. We were working as part of a Hot Choice Neighborhoods Initiative project in the community of Goldsboro. Goldsboro is a historic African-American community in Sanford. The reason that they used to have two big housing developments, public housing developments in the area, and they were basically torn down. So I was part of basically leading the economic opportunities group. And a lot of the people who actually joined from the community were people that own food businesses. And what I wanted to do is maybe try to get some sort of shared kitchen into the community. So what we did here, this was one of the grants for the Department of Commerce. What we did, we created this plan that uses food production as a means to revitalize this stressed community. We're doing this by identifying opportunities for entrepreneurship. And sadly, this one did not get adopted by the city, which was I was really sad, but it kind of became the framework for what we're going to be doing in the future. Go back, like this was the 2008. In 2021, we had been trying for a while to actually get a brownfields grant because the vision here, we were one of the few EDDs in Florida that did not have a brownfields program. So finally, after 5 years of waiting, in 2021, we were awarded about 600,000 coalition grant. And we were super excited about this. We were able to complete about 22 assessments through the 22 properties actually were impacted through the region. So one of the people that actually, we got this referral from the University of West Florida, this small nonprofit called Little Growers in Brevard County that needed a phase one assessment on this property in a suburban area. It was called Brothers Avenue. What they wanted to do was to develop kind of like a community garden. The community was a food desert. I have to say this is an African-American, historic African-American community that spans the cities of Melbourne and Palm Bay. So kind of, because it expands both areas, it kind of has lost a little of its identity. So this is a beautiful project. Like the head of the organization, Camille Hadley, really wants to make food security a way to actually bring wealth to the program. And we've been co-conspirators for a while. She's somebody that I really appreciate. And when we had the opportunity to apply for another brownfields application, it was really funny because we had all these stakeholders already set up, and then EPA changed the requirements for the grant, and I had to include a nonprofit. Well, because I knew Camille from like 2 years ago, I basically asked Camille if she wanted to join our coalition. And we were, thankful enough, we were awarded like $1.5 million this time around. This is about 2.5 times more than we had in our previous grant. And this is a really, what I tell my staff, this extra money is really going to help us to do good in the community. Before, we were only able to focus on the assessments because it was only 600,000. But with this one, we're actually going to be able to get inside the community and help this like Coleside Booker Heights community create wealth. Camille and I had been talking about, she really liked the food entrepreneurship project I had developed for Sanford. And we wanted to find funding to do the same for her community. Now, because of this grant, we're actually going to be able to develop that plan with her and the members of the community. But we added this whole climate resilience part of the project because it's kind of like, it's another thing that she wanted to do. The idea here is kind of how we're going to identify and repurpose brownfield sites to allow for urban agriculture, climate adaptation, and to expand economic opportunities from these distressed neighborhoods. We're really, 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 really excited about this opportunity. My contact information is going to be in the presentation if you need to reach me, but this is the end of my presentation. And I think we should be ready for questions, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Louise, and great presentation. I always really enjoy hearing about the work y'all are doing. And again, another plug for our new research report that Melissa and I worked on that features both of these examples and provides some more details and information about the projects. So please feel free to check that out, and we will link to that here in a second. I did have just a couple, one opening questions for our two panelists. In terms of kind of funding sources that you've engaged in, you mentioned a few in your presentations. What would you kind of recommend that most people pursue or look into in terms of maybe it's their first time, maybe they have done one or two food system projects, or something like that, where they're kind of trying to really build up their regional food system? Are there any kind of funding sources you'd recommend folks look at, or any sort of grant opportunities that you're familiar with?
Luis, do you want to start or?
I don't know, but let me maybe I'll start because yeah, we with funding we have been intentional actually of finding as different funding sources as we can, but there will be non-traditional sources of funding. Like on our side, like I said, the Department of Commerce grants, they're more like technical assistance grants for communities. That's specific for Florida, so it won't help, but maybe your state has a similar program. Brownfields, as long as I keep uh, the understanding that we're looking for brownfields and assessing brownfields, is our newest source of funding. I know there's a lot of funding opportunities now through USDA. I always miss the cycle. And hopefully Jennifer has been much better than I have in that. There are also some foundation grants sometimes. Those are a little more risky because they need to really understand what you're trying to do, and they need to have that exciting new set of partnerships. What I tell people, even before they decide to get any funding, whatever program you're doing, you know that you just don't want a grant. You're developing the vision for a program that's going to help build wealth in your community. So you're not thinking about a specific grant. You're developing a program, and then after you develop your program, then you start to try to identify those sources of funding because they're there. I know that the CDFA, Community Development Finance Authority, they started having a couple of grants for actual projects. It's not capital money, but they're really interested in developing the food system as an investment asset. And I did see a lot of like grants come in to create those kind of like value chain studies and kind of like estimating whether a food hub was going to be able to work in your community. It didn't work for my community specifically, but I know for other people probably will. But Jen, I'm going to let you go in and talk.
Yeah, that was great. Advice. Yeah, I just reiterating that. I think Melissa also put a link in here connecting with your regional food business centers. I know they're across the country and starting to roll out some business builder award grants. USDA obviously is a big one, but we've really had good success partnering with foundations. And like Luis was saying, it is a different approach to grant making. Like foundations want to get to know you. They want to build a relationship. They want to know who you are and how you operate and who's on your board and all those things. And federal funding and state funding is much bigger and maybe not quite as personal, like not that they're not awesome people, but just a little bit different approach. You know, they have very specific guidelines they're moving through. We found a lot of flexibility in foundation grants, and I think they're often a little smaller or can be smaller. We've hosted a couple of grant writing workshops as well. We did one connecting local government with nonprofit and community-based organizations and thinking about partnerships there. And I didn't mention this in the slides, but we do have a current grant through a local foundation in one of the counties that we work with. And they wanted to do some capacity building work to start a local food council. So we are not coming in to like tell them what to do and do that work. We're working very closely with community members in their county to help them support them in building a food council, but the local foundation has funded that work. So we're actually hosting another grant readiness and loan readiness event for them with them in partnership with them tomorrow. So yeah, I think it's just combination of all those things.
Before to go to the next, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. I currently been collaborating with the Tax Foundation on the creation of what is called the Better Food Policy Fund. And the Better Food Policy Fund is actually specifically for food policy councils. And we recently chose, I think it was first class of, we have 10 planning councils that are getting some seed money to actually be able to do work. We're looking forward. We just need more donors to actually be able to do more work. But it's something that we're hoping is going to be sustainable so that at least the food policy council part, which is really important. We did have our own food policy council. It was not led by the council. It was led by the city of Orlando. And it's kind of like right now it's kind of like it died pretty much for a while. We're hoping to resurrect it, but that food work of the Food Policy Council is very important, and this grant specifically is going to target those groups.
Yeah, thank you both. And we did have a question in the chat. Louise, can you please share the data source you leveraged to identify distributors and processors in your region?
We use Data Axle Info Group. If you're going to use Data Axle, you need to have very good knowledge of what the NAICS codes, and it will take a while. I don't mind if the person wants to contact me. I can give them like a quick tour of how we identify. And Orlando was really, we are the tourism capital of the world. So most of our food systems is actually distribution. We have a lot of warehouses throughout Orange County, and for that specific one, I can pretty much show the codes. I have another presentation where I have actually the snakes codes that I look at for each of these, like when I'm doing my research.
Yep, thank you, Louise. That's a great point. And I think it was John in the chat. Do feel free to reach out to Louise for that information as well. We do have time maybe for one more question here before we wrap up. Appreciate all of y'all hanging on with us here for the hour. I hope it was a educational and productive conversation, and definitely appreciate our two speakers and Melissa for providing this training today. So I'll give it just maybe 10, 15 more seconds to get your last comments in the chat if we have any more questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. All right, folks. Well, we'll go ahead and end today. Thanks again, and do feel free to check out all of the resources that NADO provides through our Economic Development District Community of Practice program, including our new food systems research report. So thank you all. Hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Thank you.